Hello and welcome to my Aspika talk. My name is Matt Raekelboom. I'm a keynote speaker and educator, just simply trying to teach people the whys and hows of their wonderful brains. I have an amazing social media content. I have an amazing social media platform that has granted me the unbelievable access of reaching 2 to 5 million people on a monthly basis. I've spoken in 27 states and 3 provinces, and I am the most passionate person that you will ever see in this space. I don't say that as a knock to anybody else, but I know who I am, and today I'm going to tell you the story of why I am confident and why I am strong in the way that I tell this. I couldn't be more excited to share this incredibly emotional story with you all today. First of all, I'd like to thank the team at Aspika for making this happen. You didn't have to allow me to share the story, but you did. And I couldn't be more thankful to the team, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for what you're doing. I really appreciate this. Secondly, I'd love to give a disclaimer to everybody listening that I am aware I am a powerful talker with a strong voice and a confident tone. However, I have what's known as a neurodiverse brain. This can cause things like anxiety, tripping over my own words, and truthfully, the incredibly simple curse of needing a minute if my brain gets too full. Now, I'm not actually saying this for your pity, which some people might instantly jump to when I say a disclaimer like that. But what I'm actually trying to ask you for is your grace if I don't do this talk perfectly. The story I'm about to tell you is completely true, intensely emotional, and uncomfortably important. I want nothing less than to impact the world with my message, so without further ado, I'd like to tell you all a story. I'm going to start things off by letting everybody know that I am what is considered in the early 2000s the poster boy for who got diagnosed with ADHD. I was a white, hyper child that caused a lot of trouble everywhere I went. I am a first-generation Canadian who grew up in a traditionally European household. For anybody that doesn't know what that means, it essentially means that when I was moody when I was younger, that essentially meant that I was just hungry. And when I was acting up and, being that child that everybody knows that we can be, in my household, it kind of just meant that I forgot what it meant to be smacked. This is the way that we treated mental health only a couple of years ago, truthfully. And this is where it gets very interesting. I was a bad kid with even worse grades. So unfortunately, that reflected a lot in how everybody saw me. Looking back on life, I realized that no matter the situation I was in, home, school, hanging out with friends, there seemed to be this recurring theme that no matter what I did, I was wrong. This brought me into the mindset that I need to accept that who I am just isn't great. I was dumb. I was lazy. I didn't apply myself. I couldn't be trusted. And in case you guys are wondering, this actually isn't my words. This is what everybody else said to me. But these did slowly become my mantras onto who I am expected to be. The more that I heard them, the more I believed it. To keep it simple. I could keep rambling, but I'd like to continue. The point that I'm trying to get across all of this is just to simply say that I was a child that grew up believing that the world understood me better than I understood myself. So when they told me that I was broken, I believed them. That's where it became difficult. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 12 years old, and this is where my journey through ADHD began. As a troubled child, getting my ADHD diagnosis actually did one of 2 amazing things for me. It gave me the blessing of understanding that I wasn't normal. It gave me the blessing of understanding that there's something that It gave me the blessing of understanding that I needed help. It, however, gave me the curse of having to rely on those around me to give me that help. And unfortunately, I grew up in a household where mental health didn't exist. These things didn't matter, and these things made us very uncomfortable. I also grew up in a household that gave me my biggest blessing and my biggest curse, which was medication. Now, I do want to go on record of saying that I am very pro-medication. I think that medication is unbelievably incredible. It does amazing things, and it's backed by a lot of science. But for myself, and the way that my story progressed, medication was known as one thing and one thing only. It was known as my miracle drug. When I took my medication, all of a sudden I went to school, and where I would normally throw my chair and become uncomfortable and do all these things to the teachers, I would put my hand up. When I was at home and my parents would come home after a long day's work, they wouldn't come home to chaos. They came home to actually just me sitting quietly. And you know what happened is my parents were the ones to coin the phrase, "This is Matthew's miracle drug." Now, this all sounds amazing, so what's my beef? Why do I look so sad when I talk about something like this? Well, the issue came next from a lack of education amongst parents taking care of a neurodiverse individual, which is when the symptoms showed back up. When I started creating a little bit more chaos even on the medication, when I stopped answering the answers in class again, all of a sudden my parents went back to my clinician and said, "The medication isn't working. What do we do?" And our clinicians, I'll never forget, very simply in the early 2000s, they had one reasonable idea and one reasonable idea only. Let's raise the dosage. Let's make it hit even harder. And without realizing it, I raised the dosage. I was okay. I acted up. We raised the dosage. I was okay. I acted up. And this went through an unbelievable cycle of finally bringing me to the point where what we understand now is that I was on double the legal limit of Adderall. But in the early 2000s, there was no legal limit behind it that was nearly close. And what happened is when I went through my hormonal phase in life, when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, using double the legal limit of a stimulant that drastically alters our neurochemistry, this is where I became anxious. This is where my face started breaking out with acne. This is where I started becoming so uncomfortable I couldn't speak in class. But I was okay. I was a good student. That's where the difficulty of all these things come in. What I started realizing and what I started hearing more and more from my parents, my friends, my family, my teachers, is I started realizing that actually, you know what's interesting? Drugs were the answer. I would have teachers bring up to me whenever I was causing a little bit of trouble in class, and they'd say, "Matthew, did you take your medication today?" Understandable, right? You want a good kid in class. Whenever I would talk a little bit too much or a little bit too loudly when I was surrounded by my family, they would look at me and they would say, "Matthew, did you take your medication today?" When I was hanging out with my friends and I was being a little bit too touchy, I was laughing a little bit too hard, or I was being a little bit too hyper, they would say, "Dude, did you take your medication today?" Now, once again, now that I've said those words, I'm going to repeat myself, and I'm going to tell you all that I believed wholeheartedly that drugs were the answer. Where this takes me next into my story is where else I found that drugs were the answer. I am somebody that from a young age, as early as 14 years old, I started smoking marijuana, I started drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, I started doing MDMA, ecstasy, acid, and anything else that made everybody like me, that made me feel satisfied, that made me feel incredible in what I was doing. All of a sudden, I realized drugs were the answer. Every time that I smoked, I had friends. Every time that I drank, I was willing to talk to people. Every time that I would just go and buy a pack of cigarettes for someone, they were like, "Dude, you're awesome." And I had not been called awesome in the past. So I realized once again that drugs were the answer. Now, am I here to tell you that medication is bad? It's going to lead you down a bad path? No, absolutely not. But what I want to tell you is that when we raise neurodiverse children of all brain types, if I'm completely honest, taking a medication and encouraging the medication and telling people that the medication, once taken, you're allowed to go outside, this is when we get into the point where drugs become the answer to our minds. Now, I don't need to go down this much further, but what I want to tell everybody is what happened next. As I got out of high school, as I graduated, as I started going into the adult world, I had already had a drug addiction. I had already had the need to find satisfaction in everything that I did, and I ended up becoming a drug addict. I ended up becoming homeless. I ended up gaining over 100 pounds during this journey. This changed my entire life. Not for the better, of course, but it made me realize that this is not who I'm trying to become. What happened during this journey is I consistently replicated in everybody's mind, who is Matt? Matt is the person that is dumb. He's stupid. He can't get anything accomplished. I had my own father tell me on multiple occasions that if I ever got an A in school, he would buy me whatever I wanted. And I would joke to him and I would say, Dad, that means that I'm going to get a Lamborghini when I get an A. And my dad went, okay, I'll get you the Lamborghini because I know you're never going to get an A. People told me from early on high school time that I should just join a trade. I shouldn't try and go to college. I shouldn't pursue anything academic because I will fail at it. I am a special needs child. I am a child that is not built to remember things, to be trusted, to be reliant on. These things led me, all from many points into my life, into this drug-addicted, terrible world where I understood that I was the dumb kid. I wasn't going to amount to anything, so why try? I was happy to do the drugs. I was happy to drink the alcohol. I was happy to go to work for 12 hours a day, mowing lawns and building gardens and doing everything that I did during that time because I knew that life wasn't meant for me. It was meant for everybody else. Now, I'm going to fast forward the story a little bit for the sake of making sure that you all stay interested, you all stay excited, and you all should know that this gets better. I attribute everything that ever happened to me to this one moment, and I want to share this with you as fast as I can, but as excitedly as I can. I was out there cutting lawns one day, and I remember Spotify had just released podcasts. Podcasts had just become a thing on Spotify, and I was sitting there, and I'll never forget, I thought in my head, who wants to listen to somebody talk for an hour? That sounds terrible. But at that point, I had already listened to every song I wanted to do or I wanted to listen to, and everything kind of wasn't great for me. I listened to music for 12 hours a day. I needed something new. So being 100 pounds overweight, having the difficulties that I had in my life, I decided to type in the word diet into podcasting, into Spotify. And I ended up seeing this one random podcast that I'd never, ever understood before in my life. It said diet and ADHD. Now, that's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? I'm the only one with ADHD. I grew up in a town of 4,000 people. I went to a school with a total of 400 children. I'm the only person in the world with ADHD, so why in the world would there be a podcast about it? And all of a sudden, I listened to this podcast, and there was this amazing speaker on it. His name is Peter Shankman. And Peter talks fast, and he's a little bit goofy, and he kind of trails off in conversation, and he's a serial entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and somebody that lives and dies by the fact that ADHD can be understood. ADHD can be controlled. ADHD can be the superpower that everybody wants it to be, with a significantly higher creativity than most people, the ability to obtain and retain more information than the average human being, but we have to learn how to regulate first. What in the world is this guy talking about? But I listened. You know, there was a certain part of me that went, screw this guy. I am a drug addict, horrendously overweight. I hate my life. I hate everything around me. But I listened because somebody, for the first time in my entire life, which I think is absolutely crazy, someone told me that I could do this. Somebody told me that I am allowed to be somebody. And then all of these thoughts started coming in my head. All of these thoughts of that one video game that I played better than anyone I know. The one time was when I was in Boy Scouts and I was able to decipher Morse code faster than anybody else there, and I won this wicked flashlight. It was awesome. I remember the time that I had my first school project on James Eugene Carey, otherwise known as Jim Carrey, my idol, my favorite person on this planet. And I went so above and beyond. I got an A+. I brought a life-size dog that... I'm just going to share it. It's fun. I brought a life-size dog and I put this silly picture on him as an interviewer. Back in the early 2000s, this didn't exist very much. I had a voice-to-text program that interviewed me about how amazing Jim Carrey was. And I went so above and beyond what any other child did that I got an A+ for the first time in my life. For what it's worth, my dad didn't get me a Lamborghini. That was a lie. It sucked. But you know what? I started remembering all of these moments that I can do good. I can be fast. I can be strong. I can be creative. I can be confident. But everyone tells me that I'm broken. So what's with that? So on top of the hatred that I had for the person telling me that I can do this, I decided to go into another area and I decided to listen. Skeptically, but I listened. And I started hearing about the differences in regulating your mind, the differences in what protein and fiber can do for you, the difference of what stretching your body before bed does, the difference of regulating your dopamine and not getting hard-hitting versions of this by social media and drugs and pornography and alcohol and all the ways that I was getting my dopamine. And all of a sudden I started to slow down. And it got to the point, I will never, ever, ever forget this moment, where I looked at my partner at the time. And she said, "Are you ready to do drugs?" And that's as simple as I'll keep it here. And I looked at her, and I'll never forget, as a very hyper and strange person, I said, "Give me 1 second. I really, really do want to do these drugs with you. But Peter Shankman says that if I stretch for 10 minutes before I engage in dopamine-inducing activities, sometimes it regulates my brain a little bit more." At this point, I had gone about 6 years of not being sober for even an hour. And that night, that specific night where I could tell you what I was wearing, I could tell you what I was doing, I could tell you how I felt in that moment, I fell asleep. Before I was able to put anything else in my body, I stretched my body, and somehow that was enough for me to fall asleep because I was so tired, guys. I was so tired in those moments. And when I woke up, it was like as if I had been seeing an entirely different lens, an entirely different person, if I'm completely honest. I noticed all the acne on my face. I noticed the horrendous amount of weight that I had gained. I noticed how terrible I felt. And I decided that something needed to change. This started the journey that brought me into who I am today. I decided to leave the partner that I was with. I took nothing but my puppy and a Bluetooth speaker. And I had nowhere to go, so I decided to become homeless. I became homeless by doing this. At this point, I had forced myself into sobriety. I couldn't afford any of the drugs or alcohol anymore. I couldn't afford a roof over my head. Thankfully, I'm incredibly thankful to say I did have a vehicle, so I had a place to sleep with a roof over my head. And I ended up getting this gym membership. I don't recommend this. I don't push this on anybody, but at the time it was pretty creative and unique. I noticed that all gyms had showers that you could use and Wi-Fi that you can access. So with my very limited smartphone, it was not an iPhone or anything, I decided to just hook up to the internet, take my showers when I can, and whenever I wanted to watch TV, I would go ahead and just walk on the treadmill. And I started just trying to get from day to day. I had a job. I just couldn't afford the things that were in my expensive place that I lived. And I just started focusing on my sobriety. I started focusing on changing the things around me. So fast forward through a couple of weeks of actually being able to live outside of this gym, get my Wi-Fi, get everything in. The withdrawals were absolutely killing me. And I apologize if this gets a little bit too graphic for some people, but I spent my nights in a cold sweat, terrible nightmares, incredibly frustrating amounts of shaking and discomfort, all without my angel of my puppy to pet in the nighttime. I don't know if I would have made it through those nights. But there was a specific night that I want to tell you guys, and then I promise this is going to get real positive and real exciting. But I want to tell you guys what changed my entire life. And it was the moment where I was sure I was going to pass. I had this moment where everything was ice cold. I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't stop screaming and freaking out. And I was sure that by the end of that night, I wasn't going to live on this world anymore. And I decided during that moment, because I was panicking, I'm anxious, it was upsetting to me, I decided to Google it. I decided to Google, am I about to pass away? I have freezing cold sweat, I'm shaking, I'm uncomfortable, I'm becoming sober, forcibly so. Am I about to pass away? And there was this interesting, beautiful moment where I found sobriety forums that all confirmed with me one thing. You gotta get through this night because this is supposed to happen. And what happened to me was not unique evidence. This was not science-backed anything, but it was actually hope. It was hope that someone had given me that I think I'm going to pass away. Well, you're not. So get through this part. And I made it through that night. And the next morning, I thought to my head, what else haven't I Googled? What else have I not understood about myself? I'm super anxious. Is there a reason why I get anxious? And lo and behold, I found out there's reasons that we get anxious. And the reason is not because I suck. It's not because I'm broken. It's not because I'm uncomfortable. I'm weak. It's because there are certain neurological deficiencies in my brain that make me a little anxious. So I started looking up, where does depression come from? Where does happiness come from? Where does confidence, motivation, concentration, pleasure, emotional regulation, where do these things come from? And lo and behold, I couldn't believe this for even a second, but there was an answer for everything that I ever didn't like about myself. And I want to pass this on to everybody that feels this way, that has felt this way, that is still working on themselves and going through their journey. There is an answer. And I promise you, it's not because you suck. What happened from this was it sparked an undying passion of mine for looking up the reasons as to why and how the brain works the way that it does. I started taking courses, I started going running, I started just working on myself, and lo and behold, before anything else that could have happened to me, I lost over 50 pounds. I wasn't trying to. I was trying to get my mind right, but because of the regulation and everything else around me, I started losing weight. I started smiling more in my days. I eventually was able to save up enough money to get a roof over my head. And I started building this journey of who knows what's going on, but all I know is I've never been this happy in my life. And man, we got to change this. So I started going to school. I started taking courses on behavioral science, positive psychology, and neurobiology. And what happened next was one of the most amazing things. I've always been this person. I've always been this person that never shuts up, this person that always loves to talk. And what happened, every single little thing that I learned that I got to tell someone. I felt the need, the motivation, the drive to just go and tell people in the streets. I used to make Facebook posts just on random local groups saying, hey guys, I have no degree. I have no qualifications whatsoever, but I've had ADHD my entire life. And I'd love to talk to you about ADHD if you have questions. And without meaning to, I had 20 people send me a message. I had 30 people, 40 people, 50 people send me a message. And I just started loving talking about these things because it made people happy. I started getting thank yous. I started getting, you're really helping me. And I wanted to take it further. So I started going to Toastmasters. I started going to nerd nights and anywhere where a person was allowed to go up on stage. And I said the same thing. I have no degree. I have no qualifications, but I read about this stuff every night. I think about this stuff every moment. And I'd love to tell you the cool thing that I learned today. Fast forward a little bit of time, just for the sake of our time, I met somebody who I started pitching the idea to. I finally got accepted to get a master's degree over at the University of British Columbia. And I talked to a friend about what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in a grocery store, and I wanted to learn about psychology. I wanted to learn about biology. I just wanted to become this amazing human. And it's interesting. I never actually wanted to be in this space. I really wanted to help people lose weight because I lost weight and losing weight is cool. I felt handsome. I felt cool. And this person gave me the most life-changing advice that I've ever received. They said, Matt, no one's going to care about your weight loss advice. No one's going to care about the psychology of weight loss. They understand already. There's over 1,000 people. There's over 100,000 people, over millions of people that are giving the exact same advice. But do you know what you do differently? You talk about ADHD. You talk about working with your ADHD brain, and I think that you should start a social media page. You should start reaching other people. And you know what I said to him? I said, nobody cares. Nobody cares about ADHD. Nobody cares about mental health. Nobody cares about these kind of things. And he said to me, if you made a social media account, you started trying to help people, I guarantee someone would care. So I decided to go home. I started packing to move to another province in Canada. I started getting myself ready. And then I decided to join TikTok. The same night that I was packing up to move to my new life, to start studying full-time and working in a grocery store. And I made a little video that said, do you have ADHD? And you're just kind of moping around and being uncomfortable and you don't like life. And by the way, I'm not saying this was a good video. I'm saying this was the video. I said, me too. I said, I've been through it. I've done the drugs. I've been through the terrible times. And I'm telling you that you can make it out. And I want to help you. As an ADHD coach, I think I can help you like crazy. What happened next sparked my entire journey through the career that I'm in now. I woke up after one night, after one video, to 2.3 million views on that first piece of content that I ever put out, and over 10,000 signups to work with me individually. I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what was happening. So I decided to really take this seriously, and I started interviewing all of these people. I started working with them, and I started realizing I don't need this grocery store job. And I started making a couple more videos, and I started thinking about it and thinking, oh my goodness, all of my talking, all of my listening, all of my ability to obtain this information and retain it all, it's being used for something amazing. And I made this very uncomfortable decision to not go to school. I made a very uncomfortable decision to start yelling at my cell phone for a full-time career. And what happened next escalated into an average of 2 to 5 million people being reached on a monthly basis, not a yearly basis, a monthly basis, for over 5 years now. I've had the pleasure of speaking at Harvard University, in front of Meta LA, at VidCon, and so many other amazing conventions. I've spoken at the Canadian ADHD conference. I'm speaking at ICANN this year, Neurodivergent, and so many other amazing places. It's my honor to become a keynote speaker whose life has become falling ass backwards into place. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to become the person that I became. But I'm telling you right now that if you care about yourself, if you want change, you can have change. If you want to start learning about the ways to combat things like anxiety, depression, difficulties with concentration, motivation, these things are real. This is possible. The studies have been done. And I've decided to dedicate my entire life to making sure that you know how to help yourself too. I run this program called Matt Raekelboom's Friendly Neighborhood. And this program is all about everybody growing together. Parents, students, and everybody alike are learning about how to understand themselves, their children, their students, their friends, their family. And we do it with a friendly look on our face, because these things are not things that are out of our control. This is not what society tells us it is. When you grow up thinking that you're dumb, when you grow up thinking that you are uncomfortable, that you are a person not meant for success, you start to believe it. And I want to make sure to dedicate the rest of my life to showing everybody that you can go through your journey too, that you can become anything that you want to become, and that you can essentially become the hero of your story. I stand here today, well, actually, I'm sitting right now. I sit here today happy, healthy, and sober. I'm going to say that one more time just for my sake, not even for your sake. I am happy, I'm healthy, and I'm sober, and I'm so blessed to be here today. For all the hard work I've done, for all the research that I've done, I want to help people across the world understand their brains, and that's what I do on a daily basis. I would love to speak at your work. I would love to go to every conference across the entire world. I want to help everyone so that nobody has to go through what I went through anymore and feel alone and feel uncomfortable and not be able to understand themselves. You are maybe one book away. You are maybe one podcast away, a couple of videos away, a conversation with a friend away from changing your entire life, and I want to be living proof of that. I love myself, and it took a long time for me to get here. And to all of you out there, I love you guys too. Just in case you haven't heard that today. I hope you all have an amazing day. I hope that you give me a chance to help you more. And again, to the Aspika Foundation, thank you all for giving me a chance to tell my story here on this stage today. Thank you guys so much. And I hope that this isn't the last time that we talk.